morning. It gives me great pleasure to introduce the first speaker, Tom Krejcie, my friend and colleague for over 35 years. Tom has a bachelor's degree from Northwestern University in biomedical engineering. He went to medical school at the University of Wisconsin, returned to Northwestern for his residency in anesthesiology, and has stayed, fortunately for us, ever since. Tom is many things to many people. He's known and well regarded as an anesthesiologist, an engineer, a teacher, a scientist, a track coach, and I've come to find out, a historian. So with no further ado, we'll have Tom present his talk on ISAP, the history of a significant society. Tom?
Thanks, Hugo. Thanks, Mike. Welcome, everyone. So I was asked to give this presentation. I've been on the board of ISAP. I attended my first meeting was actually the third annual meeting of ISAP. So I could dig into my own archives, but have help from those that preceded me. I am currently on the ISAP board as a historian, and that is a position elected by the board members, and I serve at their whim. So moving on, what is the essence of clinical pharmacology, specifically for anesthesia? But if we go back to about 500 years ago, Paracelsus tells us that all substances are poisons. There is none which is not a poison. The right dose differentiates a poison and a remedy. I look at this as really our guiding principle, and that, as Hugo said, not everything we do is with drugs, but how we determine those doses might become through monitoring. How we develop the drugs might be through studying of mechanisms. But it still comes down to the same thing. Once we have a drug, how do we use it? And we will be reviewing that multiple times today. So this is the list of presidents of the society from Elmer Zygmunt in 1990 up until Vesna, current president. And I'm going to use this to show how these people came into these positions and how they've directed the society since its start really in 1990. So, Elmer Zygmunt was at the University of Illinois Chicago Medical School. And in the late 80s, he and a group of his colleagues had an interest in neurolept anesthesia. And because of that, they started the Society of Neurolept Analgesia. Elmer is the only president that we have lost in the past 25 years, dying in 2012. Neurolept anesthesia results when combining a major neuroleptic tranquilizer antipsychotic, typically the potent dopamine 2 receptor antagonist droperidol, and the potent opioid analgesic fentanyl, and if you do those in a fixed combination, you get Inovar, to produce a detached, pain-free state. And as I said, the University of Illinois is juxtaposed physically with Rush University in Chicago, so actually the two of them got together and started Sanla. And here is their original charter. Because they were in Illinois, our original charter was in the state of Illinois, and this is dated the 19th of May, 1988 by Jim Edgar. So the problem with neurolept anesthesia is not all of the patients were amnestic. So that anesthesia technique did not last long, and therefore the society had a problem. So Dr. Zygmunt went to his friend Peter Siebel, who is in our audience today, from Emory, and also his nearby neighbor, Dr. Tony Ivankovich, who was the chair at Rush at the time, and said, I need help. We need to expand the society so that we can live on. And so Tony became the following president in 1993, and Peter Siebel succeeded being the president of the society in 1995. So a new society was born because they expanded with the guidance of Peter Siebel, Tony Ivankovich, and others to say that it's not just neuroleptic anesthesia or the combination of two drugs, but it is really intravenous anesthesia. The first annual meeting of SIVA was held in New Orleans in 1992. The course directors were Peter Siebel and Peter Glass. Meeting abstract and dues were sent to Ken Tuman at Rush. I'm not supposed to say this, but Ken's not in the audience. Whenever Tony Ivankovich agreed to do something, as soon as he agreed to do that, he would get on the phone and say, "Kenny, come over to my office." And Ken Tuman was assigned the project. So, and that's why all of the abstracts and all of the dues were sent to Ken Tuman at Rush. And as you see, the state of Illinois gave us a new charter in November of 1993, and it was the Society for Intravenous Anesthesia. And Peter Siebel, Peter Glass, and Ken Tuman went on to become presidents of the society. It was interesting that after that first meeting, it was actually supported in New Orleans by the group from Emory. And Peter Siebel tells me that they had one of the admins from Emory go along to kind of run the meeting and check people in. It was a much smaller society. And because they didn't have credit card readers, most of the people either paid with check or cash. And when they got back to Emory, surprisingly, there was no cash. And the admin was no longer employed. So that's our humble beginnings. So as I said, this is actually the scanned image. Thankful to Peter Siebel for taking this out of his archives. And as you can see here, as I said, Ken Tuman received all the abstracts. Ken Tuman received all of the registration and dues for society. So after that, the society really moved on to the Ohio State University. And meetings 3 through 7 were sponsored by Ohio State. And the meeting chair for all 5 meetings was Michael Howie. So Hugo, how would you like to do it 5 years in a row? This is a big project, and my hat's off to Mike Howie for doing that. And in 1998, he actually had assistance from Peter Glass and Paul White. So here's Mike Howie, president in 1998. And here is what sponsored our meetings. So Emory took care of the first 2. The subsequent 5 meetings were sponsored by Ohio State. After that, we went to Duke, and it wasn't in attendance at Duke, but it was typically, the meetings were sponsored by a university so we could get CME credit. So Ohio State's CME office took care of it for 5 years. 1 year it was cared for by Duke, and 1 year at Utah. So this seemed to be a good idea. It started in Illinois, started with a small group of anesthesiologists. It went national, it went international, and it went to the world. The European Society of Intravenous Anesthesia was founded in 1997, EuroSIVA, mainly coming out of the UK. And then the first World Congress of Total Intravenous Anesthesia and Target Controlled Infusion was held in Venice, Italy in 2007. So we went from SIVA to ISAP. Jim Bovell and Paul White wrote this editorial in ANA, From SIVA to ISAP, A Logical Evolution. SIVA achieved affiliation status with the IARS in 1999. There became a special section in the Journal of Anesthesia and Analgesia devoted exclusively to intravenous anesthesia. And this editorial, as I said, appeared in 2001 issue, telling us a little bit about where the society came from, why it existed, and where they see it going. Jim Bovell was rewarded for his efforts by becoming the first section editor. He was in that position for many years, and his last year as section editor, he handled over 200 manuscripts by himself. When he stepped down, we realized that that was not humane for anyone, and so we divided up the section editors to the clinical and the basic pharmacology, which is how it stands today. In their editorial, they pointed out that the new name reflected not only the continued interest in intravenous anesthesia, but also the much broader interests, which I already hinted to. We looked at not only pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics. We talked about anesthetic-drug interactions, drug delivery systems. Michelle Strees is following this lecture with that discussion. Real-time drug concentration predictions, heads-up displays, the development of recirculatory models, physiologic-based models, and cerebral function monitoring. We looked at drug receptors, mechanisms of action, pharmacogenomics, drug development, alternative routes of drug administration, and we recognize that anesthesiologists, being in a real physiologic laboratory called the operating room in the critical care unit, are actually excellent clinical pharmacologists because our drugs typically take effect shortly after administered, and they have very narrow margins of the therapeutic window. So SIVA became ISAP, and again, we have another Illinois charter. If you look real closely, this is dated 2016 because this is the one Jane got as a copy. During our rule under IARS, not all of the records were kept well, and so we can't actually find our original charter. We're still in good hands. As best I can figure, going through everything I had, this charter was signed in April of 2002. And again, you can see Paul White was president of the society in 1991, and Jim Bovell, a real heavyweight in our field, not only was the sole handling editor for all of the clinical pharmacology, he was the only president that served a 2-year term. So we are not only recognized in anesthesia, we are recognized outside of that area as a real society, and what we do is important to others. In July 2008, in Clinical Pharmacology and Therapeutics, Mike Avram, the co-director of this meeting, along with Dinesh Gupta, another member of this society, along with Arthur Atkinson, who was an internist at Northwestern and really considered one of the fathers of clinical pharmacology, wrote this editorial on a discipline. Anesthesia is a discipline that incorporates clinical pharmacology across the DDRU, the drug discovery, development, regulation, and utilization continuum. So in 2004, the board of directors of ISAP, with some hints from Tom Henthorne, decided to honor members of the international community of anesthesiologists for their contributions to anesthetic pharmacology. And to that end, ISAP initiated 2 awards initially planned to be awarded on alternate years, one being the Lifetime Achievement Award and the second being the Innovation in Anesthetic Pharmacology. Tom Henthorne served as president of the society in 2011. Our Lifetime Achievement Award winners, Ted Eager, the father of Mac, and really the man that put all the clinical pharmacology and pharmacokinetics of the inhaled agents together, was our first Lifetime Achievement Award winner in 2005. Don Stansky, 2007, Carl Rosso in 2009, Steve Schaefer, who's with us today, in 2011, John Sear is here, 2014, Johan Kotze last year, and this year our recipient. And our speaker this afternoon is Talmadge Egan. For multiple reasons, some of which were financial, we've only been able to award one innovation in anesthetic pharmacology, and in 2008 that went to Helmut Schwilden. So, as already pointed out, and you saw on a previous slide, we were a affiliate society of the IARS for many years, and the IARS was our management firm. They decided to get out of the business in 2007. They decided that it wasn't worth their time or expense to manage all of these societies, And so they said, you're on your own to find a new management firm. At the time, T.J. Gann was the president-elect of the society, and I was the treasurer, and we were charged by the society and the IRS with finding a new management firm. And as I have here, it's kind of like the story of the three bears. We were given a list of 10 possible management firms at the time, and either we were too small a society, some of these bigger commercial firms weren't interested in dealing with memberships of under 1,000, and some of the management firms were a little small. We interviewed one woman who worked out of her home, and she said if she actually came and ran our annual meetings, she would have to hire subcontractors to do that. So enter SAMI, the Signifiant Association Management Incorporated, headed, as we said, by Jane, and she has been managing ISAP. Her and her group, which is shown here, has been managing our society since 2008. T.J. Gann was president of the society in 2008. I was president in 2012. And as you can see, the IRS ran our meetings from 2001 to 2007, and Jane and her group has been running our society since 2008, and that is again based largely on where we get our CME credits. So either the idea that TJ and I came up with approval of the board to hire SAMI was either a great idea or misery likes company, because we were the first anesthesia group that SAMI started to manage. They were actually taking care of trades organizations before that. However, since then, it has blossomed for their group, and this is the list of anesthesia-related societies that SAMI is now managing, with the most recent being the Minnesota Society of Anesthesiologists and the American Society for Enhanced Recovery, started by T.J. Gann. There's always problems. We have a new management firm, and now all we need is some money, and several years ago, we were in serious risk of going bankrupt as a society. So it was Sedasis to the rescue. Ethicon Endosurgery, a Johnson & Johnson company, announced that the FDA granted permission to use Sedasis device, the first computer-assisted personalized sedation system for use by clinicians in endoscopy suites. Steve Schaefer, Talmadge Egan were major drivers with Ethicon Endo in getting this technology to market. And it was a big deal for us because, as you know, in the United States, we don't have target-controlled infusions. And the FDA's problem is, very easily summarized, a computer cannot choose the dose of a drug. That has to be chosen by a physician. This machine allows a computer to choose a dose of propofol to administer to a patient. However, the FDA realized there was problems with this device, and that GI physicians are not credentialed to use propofol because they don't know how to manage the airway. So ISAP came to the rescue. The FDA approved a training program that was developed and supervised by ISAP, primarily Ken Johnson, Talmadge Egan, both at Utah, Mohammed Naguib, who was the chairman of the Sedation Oversight Committee, and with that program submitted to the FDA, Sedasis was allowed to go to market. Talmadge Egan was the president of this society in 2005, Steve Schaefer in 2006, Ken Johnson in 2013. So, our current board of directors, if approved at our business meeting at noon today, our president, Mohammed Naguib, chairman of the Sedasis Committee, Dave Drover, president-elect, Peter Nagale is vice president, secretary Conrad Meisner, Mark Dershowitz, treasurer, and you can see our board members. We have 3 nominations that have to get approved, and as previously said, I am the historian for the society, and Michelle Strees, the speaker about to present to you, is our webmaster. The good news is we were able to get together last night, and here's a picture of 13 of the 23 previous presidents. It's a great organization with great leadership, and I would like to thank Peter Siebel, Ken Tuman, who I spoke with about the history, and Jane for pulling together as much of the artifacts as we could find. I'd like to welcome you to our silver anniversary. Thank you so much. Have a great meeting.